My family took off on an expensive getaway and didn't even include me. Instead, they stuck me with their kids like I was the unpaid nanny. So I snuck out at 5 a.m. without saying a word. By noon, they had Child Protective Services at my door, and that's when everything truly exploded. Could you ever imagine your own family taking a dream vacation without you, then demanding you babysit their kids for free, only for their reaction to your refusal to be so utterly shocking it completely broke everything I thought I knew about loyalty? My name's Alex, and I'm 22, fresh out of college with a finance degree. My dream, honestly, was pretty simple: graduate, get a decent job, and finally, move out. Seems straightforward, right? But life, as it always does, had other plans. I got my diploma, and just like that, I was back home in our small Ohio town, living with my parents. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, Sarah, and my dad, David. They're good people, truly, who worked themselves ragged to give me and my sister, Chloe, a stable home. But going back home, that wasn't exactly the future I'd been busting my butt for in college. The plan was temporary. A few months, tops. I'd find a job, save up for my own place, no rent, free food, a chance to get my bearings. It sounded sensible, logical, even if my pride took a bit of a hit. And at first, things actually went well. Within a week, I landed an analyst job at Western Group, a mid-sized financial planning firm. The pay wasn't huge, but it was steady, the benefits decent. That evening, I walked through the door feeling like I'd just taken my first real step towards independence. Mom was in the kitchen, Dad on the couch, watching TV. I grabbed a plate, sat down, and shared the news. I got the job. I practically beamed. I start Monday. I expected cheers, we're proud of you, or something. Instead, they exchanged that look. You know the one. The parent look that means something heavy is about to drop. Mom slowly put down her fork, a tight smile plastered on her face. That's wonderful, Alex. We knew you'd find something quickly. Then Dad chimed in, his voice a little too serious. We've actually been meaning to talk to you about something. My stomach clenched. Oh no. Mom sighed, folding her hands on the table. My arthritis has been acting up. I've had to cut back my hours at the library, and your dad's hours at the auto shop have been reduced. They're even talking about more layoffs. I knew exactly where this was going. And we could really use some help with the bills, she confessed, almost apologetically. Just until things stabilize. You wouldn't have to pay rent, of course, but the utilities and groceries, they've been harder to manage. I sat there, staring at my plate. When I'd planned to move back, I figured I'd contribute here and there for my own stuff. This was more. Still, they were my parents. They'd always supported me. It wasn't a huge ask, right? Yeah, of course, I said, forcing a smile. It's the least I can do. Looking back, that was the moment. The exact moment I should have drawn a line. But guilt, man, it's a powerful motivator. Over the next 6 months, life settled into a grim rhythm. Wake up, work, come home, crash. Every month, a huge chunk of my paycheck went to them. Bills, groceries, whatever else popped up. On top of that, I became their go-to for tasks they didn't have time for. Errands for Mom when her arthritis flared. Fixing Dad's Excel sheets because he was not a computer person. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was my time, my energy, my patience, all slowly draining away. At first, I told myself it was temporary. A small sacrifice for the people who had always been there for me. But as time wore on, I started noticing the subtle shifts. If I mentioned saving for my own apartment, Mom would sigh dramatically and say, "Must be nice to think about moving out when the rest of us are struggling to get by." Dad was no different. He'd shake his head and mutter, "Some people just don't know how hard it is to make ends meet." Spending money on myself, even just new work clothes, came with a heavy weight of guilt and a total lack of appreciation for everything I was giving up. My friends stopped inviting me out because I couldn't afford it. My dreams of city life faded with each month that my savings account refused to grow. When I told Mom I was thinking about a second job to save faster, her only response was, "Well, just don't let it interfere with what we need." That stung. What we need? I was giving everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. It wasn't outright malicious, not demanding, just constant, subtle guilt trips, like water slowly eroding a rock. I felt stuck. My plan was 3 to 6 months, tops. But the more I helped, the more they seemed to rely on me. The bills kept coming. I kept paying. And my vision of freedom drifted further and further away. Still, I clung to the idea that it was temporary. Just a little more saving, and I'd be out. I even started browsing apartments online, imagining my own space. But before I could make my move, life threw me another curveball. It was a Friday evening in late spring. I'd just gotten home from work, looking forward to Netflix and leftovers. Mom was in the kitchen, Dad outside tinkering. Normal. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to see my older sister, Chloe, looking agitated. Liam, her husband, was behind her, lugging bags. Their 2 kids, Lily, 5, and Max, 3, were tearing around the yard like sugar-fueled tornadoes. "Surprise!" Chloe chirped, a huge fake smile plastered on her face. I just stood there, dumbfounded. Liam looked exhausted, arms full of suitcases and a duffel bag. "What's going on?" I finally managed, stepping aside as Chloe strode past me like she owned the place. "We need a place to stay for a little while," she announced, already collapsing onto the living room couch with a groan. "Liam's consulting gig ended, and my boutique sales have tanked. It's just too hard to make rent. You know how it is." Except I didn't. I had no idea how you let things get so bad that you just pack up your entire family and show up unannounced. Liam finally shuffled past me, loaded down. "Hey, Alex," he mumbled, barely making eye contact before heading upstairs with their stuff. I was still rooted to the spot when Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, my babies are here!" she shrieked, pulling Chloe into a hug. "You poor things. You've been through so much. Don't you worry. We'll take care of everything." Dad came in a minute later, Max tucked under one arm like a football. "This one nearly gave me a heart attack." He chuckled. "Ran straight for the mower like it was an amusement park ride." Chloe gave a faint laugh, but I noticed she didn't apologize or even tell Max to stop. I watched the scene unfold like an alien observer. Within minutes, my parents were fawning over Chloe like she was a war hero. Mom was already planning dinner and where to put the kids' beds. Dad offered to clear out the spare room. And I was invisible. That night, I tried to focus on a work spreadsheet, but the chaos from downstairs was all I could hear. Lily and Max shrieked, racing up and down the hallway. Chloe's voice boomed as she recounted her business woes to Mom. I took a deep breath, reminding myself, it'll only be a few weeks. I can handle this. The next morning, it was clear this wasn't a few weeks situation. They unpacked everything, filling the spare room closet, even claiming a shelf in the pantry for kids' snacks. And without anyone actually saying the words, I became the default babysitter. It started subtly. Chloe would casually ask me to keep an eye on Lily and Max while she and Liam ran to the store. "Just an hour," she'd say, grabbing her purse. That hour usually stretched to 2 or 3. Weekends were the absolute worst. I'd wake up Saturday dreaming of peace and quiet, maybe catching up on reading or a show, only to find Chloe and Liam dressed to go out. "We're meeting friends for brunch," Chloe would announce, handing me a printout of kid-friendly activities she'd found online. "Shouldn't be too long." Not too long meant most of the day. The first time I tried to push back, Chloe looked at me like I'd suggested abandoning the kids in a ditch. "Alex, it's just brunch. You don't even have plans. What's the big deal?" "I was actually planning to catch up on work," I said, gesturing to my laptop. She rolled her eyes. "You're just sitting there on your computer anyway. Can't you do that with Lily and Max in the room? You're being so dramatic." And then Mom jumped in. "Alex, honey," she said, her voice dropping to that wise old sage tone. "Chloe works so hard. She deserves a little break." "I work hard, too," I shot back. Mom just waved me off. "Of course you do, sweetie. But you're single. You don't understand the pressure of having a family to take care of." It was infuriating. My struggles were irrelevant because I didn't have a husband or kids. No matter what I said, it was always about how much harder everyone else had it. Setting boundaries was selfish. Wanting space made me making it all about myself. When Chloe and Liam finally returned from their endless brunches or errands, they'd act like they'd just run a marathon. "You don't know what it's like out there," Liam once groaned, collapsing onto the couch as if he'd spent the day digging trenches instead of sipping mimosas. I wanted to scream, "No, you don't know what it's like. I just spent 6 hours stopping Max from eating Play-Doh while Lily demanded snacks every 5 minutes. But bringing it up would just make me sound like I was whining. I spent my Saturdays watching Bluey, dodging blocks from Max, and fielding snack requests. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad conveniently disappeared during these extended babysitting sessions, claiming errands or garage tasks. When I finally told Chloe about it, she just rolled her eyes. "Alex, they're just kids. It's not that hard." Not that hard. Easy for her to say when she wasn't scrubbing crayon off the walls or explaining for the 10th time why Play-Doh isn't food. The worst part was that no one seemed to appreciate any of it. Chloe acted like I was being dramatic. Liam rarely spoke to me unless he needed something. And Mom and Dad just thought it was normal. "You're such a big help," Mom would say one evening after I mentioned how exhausted I was. "It's good practice for when you have kids someday." The constant guilt trips were absolutely grinding me down. Every time I thought about saying no or setting stronger limits, Mom's words echoed, "Family helps family." But what about me? Didn't I deserve a life of my own? It wasn't just babysitting either. My salary, which used to barely cover my 3-person household contributions, was now stretched painfully thin with 5 more mouths to feed. Groceries and utilities doubled overnight. I tried to bring it up one evening. "Hey, Chloe, would you and Liam be able to chip in for groceries this week?" She looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. "We're barely scraping by as it is, Alex. You know that." Liam nodded solemnly. "It's tough out there right now." I bit my tongue, but inside, I was seething. As weeks bled into months, I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home. My bedroom became my only sanctuary, but even that wasn't safe. Lily and Max would burst in, scattering toys and crumbs everywhere. Everyone knew this wasn't temporary, except for me. Chloe and Liam were getting way too comfortable, and I was paying the price, financially and emotionally. I should have spoken up earlier, but every time I tried, I was the bad guy. I was overreacting or selfish. So I stayed silent. Then one evening, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but living in a house with people who don't understand the concept of an indoor voice makes it impossible not to. I was in my room, scrolling through job postings to distract myself, when I caught the tail end of Mom's phone call. Yes, we're all going to Florida next weekend for Aunt Carol's retirement celebration. It'll be so nice to have the whole family together for a proper send-off, she chirped into the phone, a wide grin on her face. I froze. Florida. Retirement celebration. Whole family. I stood up and crept into the hallway, straining to hear, wondering if I'd misheard. Mom was still pacing in the kitchen, her back to me. Of course, Alex will be here to watch the kids. It just makes sense. No point in dragging them along to something they wouldn't enjoy. There it was. The whole family would go, except for me. Apparently, I'd already volunteered to stay behind and babysit. I walked back to my room, a cold anger building inside me. How could they just forget about me? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not only was I not told about the trip, they didn't even consider including me. I wasn't invited. I wasn't asked if I could babysit. No notice. They just assumed because that's what my family did. The next few days were filled with a tense, awkward silence. Chloe was practically skipping around, shopping for vacation clothes, flaunting new swimsuits and flip-flops while Lily and Max ran rampant. Liam talked constantly about relaxing on the beach. Mom was in full planning mode, making arrangements, double-checking packing lists. Dad, predictably, just agreed with everything, nodding occasionally, but adding little more than a grunt. Nobody mentioned that I wasn't going. I tried to bring it up gently during dinner one night. So, when were you all planning to tell me about Florida? I asked, spearing my salad with a little too much force. Mom looked up, genuinely surprised. Oh, I thought Chloe told you. Chloe didn't even look up from her plate. I assumed you knew. Mom's been talking about it for weeks. 4 weeks. I wanted to shout. Weeks. And not a single person thought to mention it to me. So, what's the plan? I asked, trying to sound calm. You all head to Florida and I just stay here with the kids. Well, yes, Mom replied, matter-of-factly. It just makes the most sense. The kids wouldn't enjoy a retirement party, and someone needs to stay behind to look after them. You're so good with Lily and Max, and it's not like you'd want to come anyway. That last part hit hard. Why wouldn't I want to come? I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. Chloe finally looked up, her expression a mix of pity and irritation. It's a family trip, Alex. Adults only. You wouldn't even know anyone there besides Aunt Carol. And it's not like you're close to her. Dad chimed in, trying to smooth things over. We just figured this was the best arrangement for everyone. You'll have the house to yourself for a few days. Peace and quiet. Was he serious? How relaxing would it be to chase 2 hyperactive kids all weekend while they sipped margaritas on a beach? I ended the conversation right there. It was clear their minds were made up. Nothing I said would change it. As the days passed, I felt like an outsider in my own home. The excitement in the house was palpable. Chloe and Mom chattered endlessly about clothes, plans, restaurants. Liam, who rarely showed emotion beyond mild annoyance, seemed genuinely thrilled. I, meanwhile, remained invisible. This pattern wasn't new, though. Chloe had always been the center of attention, cheerleading captain, trophies, banners. I was the nerdy one. But it didn't matter. Her accomplishments graced every shelf. Her face dominated every family photo. Years later, nothing had changed. Chloe was still the golden child. I was still the afterthought, the person they called when they needed something, relied on, but never truly appreciated. I tried to distract myself with work, but it was impossible with Lily and Max constantly barging into my room or shrieking over toys. Chloe's parenting seemed to involve handing them an iPad and letting them run wild. Liam wasn't much better, glued to his phone while chaos erupted around him. But then one afternoon, I overheard Chloe talking to Mom in the kitchen. "It's just so nice to have Alex around," she said. "I don't know what we'd do without her taking care of the kids. She's like the glue holding everything together." The glue. That's what I was to them. Not a person with my own life, my own goals, but just the glue holding their lives together. That's when it clicked. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness and my future for a family that took me so completely for granted. I spent the rest of the week planning my escape. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. If they could plan a trip without telling me, I could certainly plan my own. I racked my brain for ideas. Then I remembered my friend Maya from college had mentioned going camping that very weekend. She and some friends were heading to Blue Ridge Falls. I'd initially declined, assuming I'd be stuck babysitting, but suddenly it felt like the perfect opportunity. I texted Maya that night. "Still room on that trip this weekend?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Of course. We're leaving early Saturday morning. You in?" I stared at my phone for a moment, then typed, "I'm in." The decision felt liberating. I was finally putting myself first. This wasn't just a camping trip. It was a lifeline, a chance to get out, away from the suffocating chaos that had consumed my life. But executing it would be tricky. My family had a knack for sniffing out anything that didn't revolve around them. If they caught wind of my plans, it would be over before it even began. I had to be smart. The days leading up to Saturday were pure tension. Chloe was in full vacation mode, parading new beach hats around the house, blasting her Beach Vibes playlist. Liam spent most of his time wrestling with car seats and complaining about the luggage. Meanwhile, Mom bustled around with a clipboard, double-checking the packing list. "Alex, don't forget Lily likes her milk warmed before bed," she'd say as if I hadn't heard it 3 times already. "Oh, and Max is picky about his pajamas. Make sure he's in the blue ones." I just nodded, biting my tongue to keep from saying something I'd regret. There was no point arguing. I was already the designated weekend babysitter, and nothing I said would change their minds. By Friday night, the house was a zoo. Mom and Chloe were bickering over food choices. Liam was attempting to fix a squeaky luggage wheel. The kids were miniature hurricanes. Dad, as usual, had retreated to the garage, which I assumed was code for fleeing the commotion. I watched it all from the kitchen, sipping my tea in silence, counting down the hours. Around 10 p.m., things finally started to quiet down. Mom put the kids to bed. Chloe went upstairs for last-minute packing. Liam sprawled on the couch, scrolling on his phone. I waited until the house was completely silent before slipping into my room and grabbing my duffel bag. I'd been packing slowly all week, stashing hiking boots and clothes at the back of my wardrobe to avoid suspicion. I carefully added my toothbrush, flashlight, and some snacks, then zipped it up. My heart was pounding, not with dread, but with anticipation. This wasn't just about camping. It was about taking back control. My alarm blared at 5 a.m. sharp. I sprang out of bed, grabbed my bag, and tiptoed to the door. The house was utterly silent, that deep quiet only found in the early morning hours. I held my breath as I opened the front door, wincing when it creaked louder than I'd expected. I froze, waiting for someone to call out, but nothing. The air outside was cool, crisp. I took one last look at the dark, silent house, then got into my car and started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, a profound sense of relief washed over me. I was free. The drive to Blue Ridge Falls was both peaceful and glorious. The farther I got from home, the lighter I felt. I turned on the radio, relaxing for the first time in what felt like months. The thought of my family's reaction lingered, but I tried to push it away, focusing only on myself. Maya had texted me the campsite location, and by the time I arrived, the sun was fully up. She was already there, unloading her car and setting up her tent. "Hey, you made it," she exclaimed, waving as I parked. "Of course," I replied. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The campsite was secluded enough to feel like a real escape, but not so remote that we couldn't find a good trail or two. Maya introduced me to the rest of the group, college friends, co-workers. Everyone was chill, friendly, and didn't ask too many questions. We spent the morning setting up tents, gathering firewood, and deciding which paths to explore. By midday, we were deep in the woods. It was surreal to be surrounded by nature instead of screaming kids and constant demands. Maya and I fell into a relaxed rhythm, talking about work, life, everything. She didn't ask about my family, and I didn't offer. This trip wasn't about them. It was about me. That evening, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. "This is exactly what I needed," I said, leaning back in my camp chair, soaking in the warmth of the fire. "Same," Maya agreed, adding another log. "We should do this more often. Just get away from everything, you know." I nodded, gazing into the flames. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. No one was begging me for favors. No one was guilt-tripping me. No one was asking me to sacrifice my time and energy for their benefit. As the night wore on, I found myself laughing harder than I had in ages. It wasn't just the jokes. It was the feeling of being surrounded by people who didn't demand anything from me. I didn't check my phone once. When we returned to the campsite that evening after a long hike, I was tired in the best possible way. My legs ached, my face was sun-kissed, and my heart felt lighter than it had in months. I wasn't thinking about my family's expectations or their constant demands. I was thinking about what I wanted, where I was going, and how I would get there. That is, until I opened the front door. The house was a disaster. Toy dinosaurs, crayons, what looked like an empty cereal box, all strewn across the couch. A faint smell of something burned lingered in the air, and angry voices were coming from the living room. "Alex is here," Mom said. Her voice wasn't warm. It was sharp, laced with an almost predatory edge. I left my duffel bag by the door and walked into the living room. Mom, Chloe, Liam, and Dad were all sitting there, faces flushed with fury. Lily was screaming at the top of her lungs. Max was curled up on the floor, clutching a juice box. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" Chloe shrieked, standing up and pointing at me. "You disappeared without telling anyone. That's what's going on." "I told you I wasn't babysitting this weekend," I retorted, crossing my arms. "You didn't tell us where you were going or what the hell you were doing." Mom yelled, her face beet red. "I'm an adult. I don't need to check in," I snapped back, my patience shredded. "Well, when we realized you weren't here with the kids, we panicked." Liam chimed in. "Panicked wasn't even the half of it. They said they were shocked when they discovered I wasn't home Saturday morning. My car was gone, my room empty, no note. Instead of thinking I'd just gone somewhere, or taken a much-needed break, they immediately jumped to the absolute worst-case scenario. "We thought something had happened to you," Mom said, her voice quivering. "We even called CPS. That stopped me dead in my tracks." "You called CPS for what?" "For abandoning the kids." Chloe cried, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "First of all," I said, waving my hand to cut her off, "I never agreed to watch your kids this weekend. You all decided that on your own, without consulting me. Second, calling CPS on me for not being here is absolutely insane. What exactly did you tell them?" "Hi, we wanted to abandon our own kids with someone who didn't agree to it, but now she's not home, so please arrest her." Did they laugh before or after they hung up on you? That is insane. It wasn't insane when we didn't know where you were. Mom shrieked. I couldn't take their ridiculousness anymore. So, what happened when CPS showed up? They left after we explained everything, Chloe mumbled, her voice softer now. But do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Embarrassing? I questioned, my voice rising to a roar. You called Child Protective Services because I didn't stick around to babysit your kids, and you're worried about embarrassment. The argument escalated from there. Chloe accused me of being selfish and irresponsible. Liam muttered something about letting the family down. Mom kept harping on how I had abandoned my family. Dad, of course, just sat there, shaking his head in disappointment, as he always did when things didn't go precisely to plan. By the time the yelling finally died down, I was too tired to fight anymore. I grabbed my duffel bag and retreated upstairs to my room, slamming the door behind me. The chaos continued until Monday. I left for work early, unwilling to endure another round of guilt trips or accusations, but my phone was already blowing up with texts. Mom, we need to talk about your behavior this weekend. Chloe, Alex, you totally screwed us over. Liam, you owe the family an apology. I ignored them all. At work, I tried to focus, but the stress of the weekend hung over me like a suffocating cloud. My coworkers could tell something was wrong, but I wasn't about to unload my family drama in the break room. By the time I got home that evening, I was braced for round 2. Mom was waiting for me in the kitchen the moment I walked in. We need to talk, she said, arms folded. I'm tired, I told her, trying to walk past. Alex, she said firmly, blocking my path. This can't wait. I grimaced and set my bag down. What now? Mom's face softened, but her voice remained stern. Your sister is hurt. She feels like you abandoned her when she needed you most. I stared at her, bewildered. She needed me for what? To babysit her kids while she went on vacation. That is not my responsibility, Mom. You should do your part as a member of this family, she said, her voice filled with anguish. Funny how that only applies to me, I countered. When has Chloe ever helped me? When has anyone helped me? Mom opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Exactly, I replied, grabbing my bag and heading upstairs. The next few days were tense. Chloe barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was only passive-aggressive comments about how hard it was to find good babysitters these days. Liam stayed out of it, which was probably for the best, but his silence was almost as grating as the arguments. Mom and Dad tried to act like nothing had happened. But every conversation was loaded with unspoken resentment. We're a family, Mom would say randomly, as if that simple phrase was enough to magically fix everything. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. The house felt more oppressive than ever. A battleground. No amount of time or space would make it better. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Dad knocked on my door. Can we talk? He asked, his tone quieter than usual. Sure, I said, even though I was in no mood for another lecture. He stepped in and sat on the edge of my bed, staring down at his hands. Look, I know things have been tough lately, and I know you feel like we've been unfair to you. He paused, and I stayed silent, waiting. But your mom and I are just trying to keep everyone together, you know? This family's been through a lot, and we're all trying to do our best. Dad, I get it, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but I can't keep sacrificing my life for everyone else. I'm 22. I should be building my future, not cleaning up after Chloe and Liam. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't quite understand. We'll figure this out, he said after a long pause. Just give it some time. I nodded. But deep down, I knew time wouldn't fix this. By the end of the week, my decision was firm. It was time to leave. This house was no longer a home. It was a war zone. If I stayed much longer, I'd lose what little sanity I had left. I started looking for apartments. After months of paying bills that weren't mine, my savings were slim, but they were enough to get me started. I found a few listings that looked promising, nothing fancy, just clean and small. I stared at my phone for a moment before calling Aunt Carol. She picked up on the second ring. "Alex, how are you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice warm and genuinely concerned. "Hey, Aunt Carol," I replied, unsure how to start. Okay, I guess." She picked up on my hesitation immediately. "What's going on? Is everything all right?" "Not really," I admitted. "I don't know if you heard, but I didn't go to your retirement trip." "I noticed," she said. "Your mom said you were staying behind to help with the kids." I thought that sounded odd. "Why didn't you come?" I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Because no one told me about it. They just assumed I'd babysit, like always." Aunt Carol was silent for a moment, then let out a sharp breath. "That doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. Your mom mentioned how much you've been helping out, but it sounds like they've been taking advantage of you." "Yeah, you could say that," I answered. "I'm actually thinking about moving out, but I'm not sure how to handle the fallout." "Well, sweetheart," she said forcefully. "You've done more than enough. You're young. You shouldn't be tied down like this. Move out, set boundaries, and let them figure out their own mess. It's not your responsibility to fix everything for them." Hearing those words felt like a monumental weight had been lifted off my chest. "And if you need any help, let me know. You deserve better than this." That conversation gave me the final push I needed. The following morning, I called my landlord and informed them that I would no longer be contributing to the rent starting next month, and my parents would have to take over. It was a terrifying step, but I knew it was necessary. After that, I spent the day packing. I didn't bother telling anyone. There was no point in starting another fight until I was ready to walk out the door. I packed everything I could fit into my car. The rest could wait. That evening, I came downstairs for dinner, ready to drop the bomb. The tension was already thick enough to cut with a knife. Chloe had barely spoken to me all week, and Mom hovered like a dark cloud. "Can we talk?" I asked, putting down my fork. Mom looked up, wary. "What is it, Alex?" "I'm moving out," I stated plainly. The silence was deafening. Chloe's fork clattered onto her plate. Mom's jaw dropped. Even Dad was visibly surprised, though he quickly masked it with his usual grimace. "You're what?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "I'm moving out," I repeated, my voice stronger this time. "I've already found a place, and I'll be leaving by the end of the weekend." "But you can't just leave," Mom cried, her voice rising. "We need you here. The bills, the kids." "It's not my responsibility," I explained, my voice firm. "I've been paying for this house, babysitting Chloe's kids, and putting my life on hold for months. It's time for me to live my own life." Chloe scoffed. "Wow. So, you're just going to abandon us? How selfish can you be?" I turned to her, my patience completely gone. "Selfish, Chloe? You've been living here rent-free, dumping your kids on me every chance you get, and contributing absolutely nothing. If anyone's selfish, it's you." "That's enough, Alex," Dad said sternly. "No, it's not enough." I shot back. "I've done everything you've asked and more. And all I've gotten in return is guilt trips and disrespect. I'm done." Mom's face crumpled, but I didn't let it bother me. "I've already told the landlord I won't be contributing to the rent anymore," I said. "So, you'll need to figure that out, too." Chloe looked like she was about to explode. Are you kidding me? You're just going to leave us with all the bills. How are we supposed to manage without you? Not my problem, I said, echoing her own words from months before. The next morning, I packed the rest of my belongings into my car. Mom stood on the porch looking sad but saying nothing. Dad stayed inside, avoiding the entire scene. Chloe didn't even bother to come downstairs. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, but above all, an overwhelming sense of liberation. The first few days in my new apartment felt surreal. Mom called several times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to deal with her yet. Chloe sent me a barrage of angry texts accusing me of abandoning the family, so I blocked her number. Aunt Carol called to check in. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, she said. It's not easy to stand up for yourself, especially with family, but you did the right thing. Thanks, Aunt Carol, I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my face. I think so, too. It's been a few months now, and things are slowly starting to feel normal. I've reconnected with old friends, started new hobbies, and even begun saving for a trip to Europe next year. I've kept my distance from my immediate family. Mom still sends the occasional guilt-inducing text, but I've stopped letting it bother me. Chloe and I haven't spoken since I left, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I understand they have their struggles, but it's no longer my responsibility to fix everything for them. I spent enough of my life putting them first. It's finally time to prioritize myself for a change. And you know what? I don't regret a single thing. Honestly, what would you have done if your own family pulled a stunt like this? Have you ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.